AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Being the reality party, as we've discussed, pragmatic problem solvers. As Dan Henninger writes in the Wall Street Journal recently, going from an agent of chaos, violating norms, threat to our democracy, to a Clayton Christensen-style disruptive innovator. It's really interesting, the transition. But, I mean, some of the executive orders this week speak to this market positioning. Just an example, the executive order that pertains to men and women. My administration will defend women's rights and protect freedom of conscience by using clear and accurate language and policies that recognize women are biologically female and men are biologically male. And if you're, say, a Supreme Court justice who doesn't understand that, there's an additional definition. Female means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the large reproductive cell. Male means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the small reproductive cell. So it's nice to see, I think most people find it refreshing, that we're returning to an understanding, at least with respect to many aspects of the human condition, to what prevailed for the 2,000 years previous to 2021. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Dan Henninger. He is the deputy editorial page editor of the Wall Street Journal. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Dan.
So,
yes, previous. Go ahed.
No, I was just saying that, you know, the reality party, you know, presenting as the pragmatic problem solver. I think we're seeing that we're seeing action consistent with that sort of rhetoric during the campaign, at least in the first couple of days.
Yeah, for sure, and especially on the executive order that you just mentioned on two sexes. Recall that Joe Biden was the candidate who said he was going to return the country to normalcy, and what we got was anything but normalcy. And you could argue that Donald Trump, for all of his volatility, is the candidate that's going to get the country back to, as you say, basics, practicality. And I just want to make one more point about the signing of the executive order on the sexes. I think this issue is really, certainly the primary issue in the campaign was inflation. The price of goods. But I think right behind it was this one, the issue of transgenderism and whether men could participate in women's sports. This was the left, the progressives, the people around Joe Biden, the Democrats, really pushing things a bridge too far. And we all recall when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of gay marriage. And I was struck at the time at how the public, the nation, by and large, accepted that decision in terms of social tolerance. It was a remarkable victory for gay Americans, but it couldn't have been more than 2 months later when Democrats and the progressives were pushing the idea of transgenderism. I was shocked at the time that they would go that far so quickly, and they never stepped back. All the pronouns that emerged and all the rest of it. And you knew that right below the surface, the American people were upset about that. And the Republicans, Trump, really elevated it towards the end of the campaign. And so here we have the culmination in an executive order defining the two sexes as they have existed since the beginning of time.
And there's also, too, I mean, it wasn't just transgenders in sports, but also the pushing of drag queens in our schools for 5-year-olds in drag queen bingo. I mean, it just didn't stop.
Well, with the left, it never stops. They just have no real restraint. And, I think I will say quickly, I think there's a lesson in there for the right. They really feel they have the wind at their back with Trump and the presidency. But as things go forward, the right should probably be a little careful about trying to simply impose its ideologies on the country. The country at large is basically center right, but take a lesson from what happened to the Democratic left in the last 4 years. Be careful about how far you go with some of these ideas.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's judicious, but it seems like some advice and counsel is required of the left, too. Not that I'm particularly concerned about their fate or want them to be better at marketing their product, but I mean, just the response, for example, where to stick on this gender identity issue for a second, the response in the House by the House Democrat caucus to the legislation that moved out of the House that would amend Title IX and protect women's sports. I mean, you didn't get sign-on, so I mean, they're completely unchastened by what transpired in November.
Yeah, I think that's right. Again, that was one of the more remarkable things about the idea of women in sports or drag queens in the fifth grade. Virtually all professional Democratic politicians signed on to that stuff. I was really amazed when they were doing that they just didn't have more common sense. But they did. And a question has been raised, have they been chastened now by Trump's victory? Are they going to try to recalculate what the party stands for? I have my doubts about that, Dan, just based, if nothing else, on the confirmation hearings and the direct assaults that the Democratic senators waged against these nominees. It just sounded like old times, as though the Trump from the 2016 era was up there on Capitol Hill. So I don't know if those zebras are going to really change their stripes at all.
Well, on the big issue that brings both parties together, spending money that we don't have, that seems to me something where there is, it's really an open question in terms of even with Doge and Elon Musk in tow, the prospect of really starting, if nothing else, but to slow the rate of debt accumulation, to reduce the annualized deficits. What's your handle on the prospect of progress on that front?
It's going to be a hard slog. I was just looking at the debt yesterday, Dan. It's now over $36 trillion. One assumes that people get numb to these figures, but I don't think the general public is numb to them at all anymore. I think it's an issue for people. They understand that debt is going to be paid by their children or their grandchildren. And Trump has spent the last few days signing one executive order after another and putting things in motion. But the reality of those executive orders suggests the extent to which Congress no longer functions. I mean, that is simply, literally, the executive issuing, taking power. But Congress, slim majorities, and Congress doesn't work very well. And primarily, Trump wants to get the extension of that 2017 tax bill through the Congress, and he wants to do it through the reconciliation process, which involves spending. And the question is whether the Democrats are going to agree to controls on spending and work through a budget reconciliation that imposes some controls. I think that's really an open question. It's going to be difficult. It's going to require Democrats in the House or Republicans in the House holding together around Speaker Johnson rather than trying to undermine him. And that's going to require some leadership from Donald Trump, who probably does not want to spend too much of his time interacting with Congress. But I think it's probably going to be necessary if he's going to succeed up there.
And with all of the praise that is heaped on Musk, sort of some of it, I think, from Republicans, institutional Republicans damning him with faint praise. we've seen this before. I mean, it wasn't maybe as sexy as Doge, and it didn't have the richest man in the world at point. But I remember when Bill Clinton put Al Gore in charge of the Reinventing Government Commission, and so we've seen this approach before. And I hate to be cynical because you want to be somewhat hopeful, but the idea that Musk singularly provides enough leverage along with Trump if there's real interest in reducing the footprint and the spend of government to actually get that done with those slim majorities you mentioned.
Yes, I agree. I would say the cynic in me feels that Elon Musk is more likely to plant that flag on Mars than he is to get control of the federal bureaucracies in Washington. But that said, there were those efforts by Al Gore, and before that, the so-called Grace Commission during the Reagan presidency. What I think Elon Musk brings is a more high-powered analytical power. Data analytics, as we know, is a very powerful tool that can be used today. And I think they're going to try to collect data about the nature of some of these agencies and bureaucracies and do some analysis that really does expose some of the waste and efficiency. The bureaucracies are usually pretty good at hiding that, but they have numbers, they have data, and I think it's Musk's intention to try to bring to the surface just which of these agencies and departments truly are outputting mostly inefficiency and wasted taxpayer money. And if he can focus a light on that and bring it to the surface and get some publicity on it from the media, I think they can make some headway on it this time.
Well, the other thing that he has that those previous iterations didn't have is he has his own media. He has his own blowtorch. And this is a way where you don't have to rely on the D.C. press corps, which, is a fan of big government, generally speaking, always has been, to do your bidding for you. I mean, all this stuff can be funneled through acts, and that can drive the national understanding and discussion on the topic. So, I mean, to me, that's where I have more optimism than perhaps previous gambits of this sort.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing is going to be closing a department. There's just been a debate about closing, say, the Department of Education. Well, I recall the Interstate Commerce Commission, which was established in 1885. There was a consensus in the mid-1970s that it outused its usefulness and mainly regulated railroads. It took 25 years to shut down the Interstate Commerce Commission. Bill Clinton was the one who ended up signing the legislation to close it. That's really a heavy lift. The Department of Education has its tentacles out there into so many nooks and crannies of American life, education from K through 12 and into the universities. That would be hard, but nonetheless, you can focus on certain functions inside those departments, like the Title IX offices, and try to close that sort of thing, which might be a more effective way to go.
What do you
Daniel?
think? Oh, are we out of time, Dan?
No, go ahead.
Well, what do you think's next for Kamala Harris? I mean, I saw her. She was in L.A. yesterday meeting with firefighters, and it was just another word salad to the LAFD. But do you think she's really going to run for governor or possibly president in 2028?
I really don't see it. I was having an interesting conversation with some associates here in the past 2 days, and the big question was, when is the truth going to emerge about what was going on in the Biden White House and the people around Biden? Who knew what? Who was responsible for all of the stuff that went on in there? And guess who was in on all those meetings?
Jill
Kamala
Biden.
Harris.
Oh, Kamala Harris. Oh,
Of course.
okay, yeah.
Of course.
Can you imagine how much of a book advance she could get if she were willing to tell all? I mean, it would be like $10 million. And her relationship with the president is pretty frosty right now. And I know I'd pay to read that book.
The only problem is, of course, she would be implicating herself and participating in the fraud of propping up Joe Biden.
Yeah. Well, that's been going on for some time.
Yes,
But
yes.
elective office, I'm hard put to see it. I think she's tapped out on that score.
Dan Henninger, deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Dan, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Great to talk to you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
When I hear realtors boast about servicing a 3-county area or selling a home every 15 minutes, I think, what level of service could their clients possibly be getting? This is Chris Jacobs with Century 21 affiliated in Inverness, and my message is a little bit different. If being a realtor for more than 20 years has taught me one thing, it's that all real estate is local. While I can't say I'm the #1 realtor in the country,